Welcome to the Your Living Proof podcast. If you love someone struggling with addiction and are searching for answers, we're so glad you found us. Families are the cornerstone of long-term recovery, yet they often go unsupported. Our mission is to strengthen and support this vital but often overlooked part of the addiction recovery process. We're here to help families understand what their role is and isn't in this journey. Addiction deceives and takes everything you're willing to give, but if you know better, you can do better. And we're here to help you do just that. If you're asking, how can I help my addicted loved one? This is your community.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Your Living Proof podcast. I guess if you're not watching this and just listening, there's a lot of new changes. So
that's your cue to go to the YouTube channel and see what we're talking about.
No, but we're really, truly excited. Going into this year, our hope is that this podcast will continue to benefit more people and that more individuals and more families that are really fighting this spiritual battle and trying to help their loved one in their addiction will benefit with more tools and an insight to what we're doing.
Yep.
So we're in a whole new podcast. We have a whole new recording studio. We have a whole new approach. And one of those today is sharing a story. From personal and professional experience, I know that this story is becoming very common, probably far more than any of us would want. But there's real power in hearing our stories, and especially the things that people did different to change the outcome. So we're really excited. We have a guest. I do have to say before we get going, just to kind of break the ice in this new studio, on the way over, something happened that was real personal to me. And I'm having a hard time processing through it.
What, you're horrible driving?
We're driving over here and little firecracker says to me for the first time in our marriage, how long have we been married? 16, 15?
17 years.
17 years. Wow. Okay. So she goes, maybe I should drive. And so that was like a little taste of humility.
And you deserved it.
She was like, you drive horrible. And I was just distracted.
I actually was like, our 15-year-old that is learning how to drive with a permit, I think I would feel safer if he were driving right now. Anyway, Danny's mind was distracted.
It was. And so I'm having a hard time. We're settling into a new studio. I'm settling into a new reality that for the first time, my driving wasn't approved.
No, it wasn't.
It's really hard.
I'm driving home.
Because as a man, we're just, we have certain responsibilities. And if that's threatened, I'm trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get to it. You guys, I do want to just set the stage real quick. We're going to introduce Stephanie here in 1 second. And most of all, I just want to say how grateful we are that she's willing to come and share this story. It's a personal one, a story that often a lot of people don't share for different reasons. But the courage to come and share this, we're very grateful for. And I hope that there are so many out, actually, no, there are so many out there. This morning, as I was prayerfully preparing for this, it was just confirmed spiritually to me that there are so many people experiencing this same story of their own. There's slight variations in each person's story, but I really hope that this story empowers you to hear the change and the transformation of what happened. So for context, Stephanie's part of our program. She has been. I've had the opportunity to get to know her and her husband, also her son. Her transformation's been amazing. And watching the work that she's done for herself and her family has been, it's really hard to put it into words. It's been special. And also the influence that she's had on other people in the community who are a few steps behind where her and her family were. It's just been the most beautiful thing. To top that off, she was asked to share in her congregation recently their story, their family story. And we had the opportunity to hear it. And I called her and begged and pleaded to just, will you come and almost just read exactly what you shared? Because there was a lot of preparation, a lot of hard work that went into not only preparing to share this with her congregation, but obviously all the work that went into backing that up. And so we asked her to just come and to share that same story. And I'm excited for so many of you hearing it, to be able to hear yourself in that story, and hopefully what we need to do as a family to move forward. So Stephanie, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, I'm really excited to share our story. I feel a deep sense of responsibility, having learned so much about our family's experience with addiction and recovery. And I hope by sharing what we learned, we can help others. So our story begins in June of last year. We learned that our 17-year-old son was struggling with addiction. And to be honest, we had suspected it for months. But there's something different about finally hearing the truth spoken out loud. 2 months before that, our son left home following a very difficult argument. It happened in front of our 2 younger daughters, just 1 month before our son's high school graduation. During that time, our son continued attending high school and graduated, but we didn't know where he was living. Some of you may hear this and think there were things we could have done differently, but by that point we were exhausted. The previous 2 years had been filled with ups and downs, fear, confusion, and contention. We were trying to make the best decisions we could for the entire family and often felt unsure which path was right. One night, my husband received a phone call. "Dad, can you come pick me up? I don't have anywhere to go." It was our son. My husband told him he could come home, but we had set a boundary. He could not come inside. He would have to stay outside, in a tent or in the shed. Our son then asked to speak with me, thinking he might get a different response. I reiterated what my husband had said. He couldn't come inside. My son responded, "Well, we'll talk about it at home." That night, we presented him with a plan. He could go to rehab, or we would take him to get housing the next day. He had been working, and we believed he had enough money to do so. The following night, our son tearfully agreed to go to rehab. I remember sitting there, listening as he shared painful details from his past. My husband and I felt relief that he had agreed to treatment, but we were also stunned. I realized that I no longer recognized my son sitting in front of me. The truth settled in. My son is going to rehab. My son is an addict. And this was something lifelong and potentially fatal. I had so many questions. Who is he right now? How did this happen? What did we miss? And what do we do now? One of the strange realities when your loved one enters recovery, especially as a minor, is isolation. We had no communication with him for several weeks. He ended up in a rehab facility across the country. We didn't know what he was thinking. We didn't know what was happening day to day, and we didn't know what we were supposed to do. During that time, I was overwhelmed with feelings of shame, blame, fear, guilt, and a deep lack of understanding about addiction. We learned one of the reasons why addiction is Satan's weapon of choice, because it's the quickest way to destroy not just one person, but an entire family. One of the most tragic parts is how it creates dysfunction inside of the rest of the family, progressively corroding family relationships, weakening faith, building resentment, anger, disagreement, and contention about how to move forward and what to do next. I found myself wanting to learn as much as I could. I knew statistically there were many people affected, in fact, 1 in 6, but I had no idea where or who to turn to. In my research, I also found that relapse rates for specific substances exceeded 80% in the first year, which added another layer of fear. My husband found a program on social media called Your Living Proof, run by a member of our church who is a recovering addict. The program is designed for the family and offered what I so desperately needed: a community with people who understood what I was going through, an expert I could ask questions, and coursework to learn about addiction. One of the greatest blessings that came from this experience was our immediate recognition of the truths being taught in the program. We came to understand that we too had been affected alongside our son, that we also needed healing. We learned that our son's recovery depended not only on his efforts, but on us as well. One of the greatest threats to addiction is a united family, and we were willing to do whatever was required to save our son. So while he began his journey of recovery, we began our own. One of the first things I struggled with was this idea: addiction is a disease. I kept thinking, isn't this about choices? Didn't we teach him right from wrong? Don't we all have agency? Here's what I learned. Addiction begins with choices, but addiction can eventually hijack the ability to choose in the way we normally mean it. This is the other reason why addiction is Satan's greatest weapon. It has literally taken away their free agency. For an addict, the power of addiction has removed any ability to have a choice anymore. Normally, when something bad enough happens to us, we decide we're going to change. However, with addiction, it's different. Just think, there are treatment centers throughout the world, and almost all of them are full of individuals who have been court-ordered by a judge. None of the residents made it there because they made the choice themselves. Even when they have moments of clarity, even when they see all the pain and damage that is piling up around them, they cannot stop, even when they want to. Everything else is collateral damage, including their own life. There are many studies to prove this. Over time, the poisons they are consuming literally rewire their brain. We also struggled with stigma and shame. Who wants to share that their child or loved one has gone to rehab? But one of the most important truths we learned was this: shame grows in secrecy and healing grows in light. When we name what is happening, when we seek support, when we stop pretending, shame begins to lose its power. One of the mantras in our program is, "Our secrets keep us sick." That is one of the reasons programs like Alcoholics Anonymous are so powerful. Because when people share their story and speak honestly about their struggles, the pull towards drugs and alcohol begins to loosen. And the same is true for families. When we step out of isolation and realize we are not alone, we grow stronger. One of the most important steps my husband and I took was making sure our son knew that we were not ashamed of him or his disease. By sharing our story today, my hope is to help lessen some of the stigma that so often surrounds addiction. Addiction is one of the few fatal illnesses where families are often tempted to ignore warning signs, make excuses, or hide in fear, rather than unite and take action. We learned that survival depends on choosing unity, clarity, and courage over shame and silence. If I'm completely honest, my biggest struggle was with blame. I blamed everyone and everything. I blamed my son. I blamed my husband. I blamed God. I blamed our church. I blamed our town. And most importantly, I blamed myself. I blamed anyone and everything I could find. And here's what I learned. Addictions require blame to survive. No one becomes addicted to any substance without something to blame it on. It keeps the story focused on pain instead of repentance, healing, and change. The hardest part of this realization was understanding that I could be right. The blame could feel justified, but I had to accept that when I embraced blame, It only strengthened the disease and kept us both stuck. Letting go of blame became one of the most necessary and humble changes I had to make. So I began, little by little, to surrender. I don't remember a single defining moment when everything changed for me. What I do remember is being surprised by the depth of love I felt for my son. As I learned more about addiction, I began to better understand the pain and suffering our son had experienced, and my empathy for him grew. I started to see the weight of what he had been carrying. I also remember reaching the point of surrender to the Lord. One of the most important lessons we learned through our program was that control does not work with addiction. What does work is setting clear boundaries and learning to speak to the disease itself. I started to separate and see what addiction had done to our son from who he truly was and who he still had the potential to become. I'd like to shift for a moment to my son's own journey. He recently came home for Christmas, and during that time, we had the opportunity to hear him share more of his story. While in rehab, our son decided to read what is known as the Big Book, which outlines the recovery program used in Alcoholics Anonymous. It is more than 500 pages long, and our son read it in just 1 month. The book walks through the 12 steps of recovery. The first step is admitting powerlessness over alcohol. For our son, this step came easily, given what he had already experienced and the reality of being in rehab. The second step, however, was much harder. Step 2 is developing a belief that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. This is how he described that experience. Step 2 was hard for me because I didn't want God in my life. I had shut him out for a long time and didn't want anything to do with him. But the Big Book said that the only way for a true alcoholic to recover is to have a profound spiritual experience. It also said that if you don't work the steps, you will drink. And for us, drinking leads to death. The only outcomes are jail, death, or sobriety. So I decided I might as well give it a try. I started to pray. I prayed every day. After a few weeks of praying, one day while I was in the shower, I wasn't praying or thinking about anything. I suddenly felt a presence. I fell to my knees and cried my heart out to God. I confessed everything I was and asked him to take my problems and do whatever he wanted with me because I couldn't do it anymore. I felt completely hopeless. I didn't know where I was going to end up. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. But from that day forward, everything began to change. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. God had the wheel, and I didn't have to do it on my own anymore. Today, our son is 8 months sober. He has worked through all 12 steps, speaks at multiple AA meetings a week, and is committed to helping others. He says the hole he had inside of him has been filled by God. Our relationship with him has never been better, and we are so incredibly proud of him. This experience has taught me about the power of atonement in a way I never fully understood before. There was a profound change in our son as he turned his life over to God, but there was also a change in me. The Savior didn't just work on my son, he worked on my heart. He taught me empathy where there had once been judgment, humility where there had once been control, and peace where there had once been fear. I have gained a deeper understanding of addiction and a deeper love for my son and for others who struggle. I have seen real examples of weaknesses become strengths. I have come to see my own story reflected in the parable of the prodigal son, not just as the parent waiting, but as someone who also needed to repent, to soften, and to learn how to love more like the Savior loves. When the prodigal son returns, he comes believing he is no longer worthy of being called a son. But the father does not hesitate. He runs. He embraces him. He restores him. He does not shame him. He does not remind him of his failures. He rejoices that his son is alive. For this, my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. I've had to trust that the Lord loves my son more than I do. I know that he is not yet done with our son, and he is not yet done with each of us. I truly want to thank Danny for giving us back our son. I know that if we had not joined this program, we would not be in the situation we are with our son. We have learned so much about recovery, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share. Thank you.
Oh,
Wow.
Stephanie, I'm just as overwhelmed hearing you share your thoughts as I was the very first time I heard them.
Well, and you can see why. That's why we asked her to just come and to read what she had diligently prepared for to share with her community. Um, I just, is it okay?
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to point out a few parts to this because I think there are so many experiences shown me. Unfortunately, it's actually the majority of families are dealing with something like this. Um, some of them to this extent, some of them are just now finding out. Maybe some of them it's even progressed to a place that's worse. But all these families sitting back feeling powerless. There were so many things that were just shared that I just wrote down. Um, I just wanted to mention, and then I had a question for you too, Stephanie. You addressed something I think most people deal with but are afraid to, which was the shame. And your phrase, I hope I didn't slaughter it, but it says shame grows in secrecy and healing happens in light.
Mm.
And also as a mother to understand that addiction started as a choice, but along the way, it changed. It went from a choice to a person's inability to exercise their agency. And for a lot of good people, especially people of faith, that's a really hard one to interpret. I could go on and on, but the important part to me here was those of you that are listening, I think that story sounds good. It's something we all want to experience. But I hope connecting this dot allows people to stop hoping and to implement plan and to take some action, because the experience that you and your husband had, and I got to witness it, by the way, like I got to witness it working with them personally, interacting in small private groups, was a process of understanding, first of all. Then it was a process of acceptance. And then it was a process of change and healing. And all of that took action. And I think that's a part that we often miss in all of this is Stephanie and her family, to paint the picture, they are beautiful, they're talented, all their kids are amazing, they're doing all the right things, as are most of us families. But addiction toyed with them in a way that it does other families where they just couldn't make sense of it. And then when you add on it being someone that they love and care about, it just confuses it. It feels impossible because it's so personal. But everyone comes into this journey in one way or another. And the beauty is they joined into a program of support and started to take action themselves almost simultaneously when their son did. And that is actually, if you're listening in, where a lot of people miss the ball. A lot of people are successful because of certain things like consequences, accidents, like there are circumstances that usually help us get someone into treatment. But what does the whole family do?
No, that
They
was actually what I thought was so beautiful about what you shared, which I would love to hear you articulate this. I think most people see getting their loved one to rehab as like, we did it. Now we don't have to worry anymore. Like that was the goal, and like, check, we got them there. But it sounded like, and I don't work intensely with you like Danny did. It sounded like that's when your work inside of your home really began.
Yeah. Yeah, as soon as literally, I had started looking at rehabs when I learned that he was an alcoholic 2 months prior, before we even addressed it with him, because I had found, empty bottles of hard alcohol in his room and didn't even know. And that scared me to death, and along with everything else that we had known up to that point. And so the realization was there, and I was pretty calm about it and looked up rehabs for a minor and had done all that research. But it literally was when he finally admitted to go to rehab, it sunk in. And after he left, it was like a total depression came over me. I couldn't function. And someone equated this to like another fatal illness hitting your home. And yet you can't talk about it with people. You can't say, I need meals, I need help, I have this thing hitting my house, because there's so much shame associated with it. And you're dealing with this. My husband was on a different page. He didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it. I went to an Al-Anon meeting because I was educated enough to do that, but it wasn't enough for me. I thought, no, I need real help. I need answers. I wasn't being a good parent to my other daughters. It was consuming me, because I knew we had done something to contribute to this and we needed to fix it. And so, but I do think there's this misconception, and I want to address, and we did even until we joined the program, that our son was going to go to rehab and then he was going to come out and he was going to be fixed. And I didn't realize the other steps that he needed to take. And he got into sober living, and that has been amazing. He's been there for 8 months. And our sons even said, if you had taken me out of rehab and brought me home, I would have relapsed. And I know if we hadn't changed, even if we saying those words to him, we're not ashamed, and here's who we've told about your situation, to say those words to him was such a huge step for us, and had such a huge step for him, because a lot of people do bottle that up. Immediately we were like, who do we tell? Who do we share this with? We're going to be judged. We're going to feel this. But how much does that mean to the one who's addicted, that you're not ashamed of them and you understand what they're going through? And for people who will judge me, I'm like, I don't care. You don't understand. So you need to get educated. And, if you need help, I will help you. But I think that's really important for the loved one to hear, that they're supported and you understand what they're going through.
It is. And it remains to be this unknown fact, or just a really hard thing to accept, because the truth is, what I'm about to say is unfair. And that is, often someone like your son, myself, and millions of others, we do certain things. There's certain behaviors that come from our choices that turn into an addiction, and people in our life are put into an unfair situation. But the way out for healing and restoration is everyone to participate, everyone to take actionable steps, everyone involved to not only learn or to speak up to something, but to work through how it's changed them. Because that's the beauty in this, is I watched when like Stephanie, her husband, got involved, they still have a very strong marriage and a unity, but the addiction had affected each of them differently, the same way it did my parents and everyone else. And even if it's a spouse, everyone else in your life is impacted differently. So what was beautiful to watch is the willingness of you and your family to accept help, first of all. I mean, to find it and then to accept it and then to go, oh my gosh, I have so much else going on. Like, I'm good. I don't need help, but to be willing to do it. Because what happened in the beginning is that took how Stephanie had been affected and her husband differently, and it started to heal them. And when that happened, it started to just to bring them back together. There are a lot of people like her son fortunate to get to a program because, like I said earlier, for one circumstance or another, but for those who are able to return home to an environment that's changed and healed and improved, that is the difference between people who recover for long term and those who kind of stay stuck in this cycle of dysfunction. But what's hard is some of us that have really good families that come from goodly parents to even see the need for that.
Mhm.
And I love the practical part you shared at the end. And I hope everybody listening in to her story caught this. Her son started, and there was no magnificent moment. He learned from others. He put into practice what was being taught, and he kind of grinded it out. Like he kept doing and praying, even though he wasn't getting an answer, even though he wasn't feeling a change. And eventually it did. And it was the same thing for his mother on the outside. She didn't want to be in those things. She didn't want to be talking about this. She didn't want to be addressing it. Nobody does. But as soon as she did, and she started to to heed to counsel, she started to be informed. And then she actually started to put into practice the scariest things, which was working through the fear, working through the blame. It started to change her heart. And it was really cool just to experience watching the change happen in the home environment because her son was off getting the support he needed. And I don't know if it's okay to share, but he actually came back and recently was willing. Look how cool this is. So he went off and had his own experience. And then I think he was like about 6 months, right?
Mhm.
He actually came to our groups and shared to the parents, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I went through. But coming home and seeing this shift in my parents and helping them connect the dots and understand how transformative that was, I just love it. Because think about what was so shameful for both of you not long ago is now something that he's screaming from the rooftops and you're opening up and willing to share with other people. It's just been beautiful.
Well, and when he shared, it was so interesting that he shared everything that you had been talking to us about. Those connections were there for me. So you're actually hearing him reiterate what you had been sharing. And when I said, that's what Danny's been sharing, he goes, I've lived it. But I think all folks who are in recovery, all they want to talk about is the recovery journey. That's all he wants to talk about, his experiences, his stories. And so the majority of what we talk about is what he's going through in recovery. So if you don't want to talk about it, then what are they going to talk to you about? And initially when he was first out of rehab, those conversations are really scary because you don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to be judgmental. And so I remember you always told us just praise. And he was like, yeah, I walk, it's really hard being out. I just walked by like a 7-Eleven and, they sell alcohol there. And it's like, okay, well, just listened. I just listened as much as I
Yeah, but
could.
as a mom, you're like, oh, don't tell me those things. I'm scared.
Right. Like
Yeah.
just you have to trust that they're doing what they're doing. But you would tell us things like, it's okay if he relapses. It's like, okay, so we're getting this advice, but I do think it's important to understand that this is reality and we know what to do next time in case this happens. And so
Yes.
it's great to have that expert advice and that community of people that you can talk to and understand that that's common and this might happen next time, and don't freak out or don't do this, don't do that. So you understand how to react better and what to say to your loved one. So, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, and kudos to you. You guys, and there's lots of other families in the program who are willing to finally learn those things because we can have our opinion about them, or we can just start to learn what's probable, what's true, and then be prepared, right? I think a lot of families go into this just hoping and praying. And that's something we've all been taught to do since we we're little. And it's needed, but there also has to be a plan. There has to be some understanding that you and your spouse have of if this happens, what do we do? And this is how we respond. This is how we react, so that way we're removing the fear from something that otherwise just kind of kept us sitting there waiting. And I love it, because the hard thing to tell someone, if someone's listening into this and they're in that place where you were about a year ago, it's really hard to even see a day in front of you, let alone maybe a foot in front of you of what's going on. You're just paralyzed by doubt, fear, blame. It's affecting every area of your life. And it's hard to see and apply this in their life. But the truth is, it again is the willingness. I love what you said is his recovery and yours was incremental, and it required surrender. It required asking for and accepting help, but it also required action of showing up. I mean, watching the transformation occur in you, because you guys are hearing her speak now, and it sounds so convicted and it sounds so strong. And that change that she's experienced didn't start that way. I mean, when she started, it was the same way everyone else is feeling, which is just lost and powerless, angry, hopeless. It was action that she continued. She continued to go through the courses, continued to show up. And as she learned, also offering that help to other people that were just starting. That's why I always say addiction's so selfish, and it's like the worst thing you can imagine ever happening.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of it, it has the opportunity to produce something if people are willing to do the work. And the most beautiful thing, because as your son heals and you guys heal, moving forward, the connection and relationship you're going to have with that boy is going to be so authentic, based upon truth, based upon a family learning how to have hard conversations, so there's just so many lessons that he learned, but thankfully you and your family did what was required so that you didn't miss the opportunity to experience the beauty of it, right? It's like
Yeah.
God gives us all these hardships, and the only ones who get to see the fruits of it are the ones that do it. I'm just so proud of you guys.
Thank you. Well, I definitely wouldn't wish this on anyone, because I do think addiction is so manipulative, and that's why it's important to separate the disease from the person. It's really hard when it's your loved one, because you're just like, what are you doing? What are you saying? Why are you lying? Why are you? But it's that addiction, and you get caught up in the denial of it, of are they really addicted or are they not? And we didn't struggle with that so much. We didn't struggle with boundaries, but I know people really, really do. And you get caught up in that. Why are they doing this? What's going on? And you just get so confused and manipulated, and it's awful. But I do think coming out on the other side, our son struggled with empathy. He struggled with understanding other people, and he struggled with listening. And he's been able to learn all of those things by going through this process.
Mm.
We were really concerned when he came home from Christmas. Like, I wanted this perfect environment. How is it going to go with our family dynamic? Because for 2 years, we walked on eggshells. It was awful. And it was the most amazing experience. I just looked at him and was like, who is this amazing person sitting next to me? I mean, I always thought he was amazing, but to see him now and how much he's growing and developing, it's just incredible what this has taught him. So it can become you can grow even better. And I do think, to give credit to the 12 steps, can become an even better person. He was doing like step 4, which is the inventory. It took him like 2 months to do this, to come up with every defect he had. I'm not going to do that. I mean, he's doing even harder things than I'm doing. So there's a lot of good that can come out of this, but it's extremely hard on families. And I think that's why the community is so important, to be able to talk to people who aren't going to judge you, and to be able to feel like you're in a safe space. That's what I needed. I needed
Yeah.
people who could understand what I was going through, because you feel so alone.
Yeah.
Stephanie, something that you said was that it's like a disease, it comes into your house, but you can't tell anybody about it.
Mm.
You can't ask for meals. You can't, reach out to your typical community for the support most would ask for in that scenario. And that's what I hear you saying as you entered into the community, that was your safe place, that you didn't need meals maybe, but you needed support. You needed to hear strength, to borrow others' strength that you didn't have at the time. I loved how you articulated that, because I think there are so many women in that space. And you also articulated how your husband dealt with it differently than you did.
Mhm.
So before we close, I actually just wanted to ask you if you could speak to yourself a year ago, if you could go back and tell yourself anything, what would you say?
That's really tough. I did have a couple of close people that I talked about, and I did ask for a meal. I would ask for more meals. I wouldn't be
Yes.
ashamed to say that, because I was really going through such a difficult time. And I think I wasn't feeling judgment from people necessarily in my church community, whereas you feel that internally, that people are going to judge you from this. Um, I think, to Danny's point, we took a lot of action immediately, and I'm so glad we did. I think that trusting of experts in this space is really important. It's kind of like when someone's telling you something and they're an expert and you question it or challenge it. Like, they're the expert. You need to trust what they're doing and take that action. Um, I think it does take time. So I really did struggle with blame. I remember one time I was on a call with Danny, and the group, and and I said, I'm just really struggling with blame, and he gave me some answer, and I think I just hung up. I think I just left the group, because I was like, I don't want to hear this. I don't believe this. I'm struggling with this. I want to blame. And I do think I was then realizing I was progressing my son's disease. If I wasn't stopping what I was doing, my son was progressing in stopping his disease, because he was working the 12 steps. But I was being stuck. And so then we weren't going that parallel path, because really that's what you need to do as a family. Is your loved one is working these steps, and you need to work those steps. And I thought, how do I do that? What's the framework to be able to do that? I need help to understand it. I need to have my questions answered. I need to be able to understand this. So I just think that faith and hope would be there a little bit more for me, because I felt pretty hopeless at the time. And but I do think it takes time. It's a really, really challenging thing. I think having stories like this will be helpful for people, because it's such an isolating situation for the family. And I do think telling that story, that it's not just the addict that needs help, it's the family as well. They are that support that can help that loved one get through.
Yep, for long term. And I'm going to go to my grave screaming it from the rooftops. The sad reality is there are millions of people in addiction who do not have a family that is a benefit to them. Unfortunately, a lot of people come from abusive homes, alcoholic parents, where the environment is one they're trying to remove them from. That's actually what's saturating the recovery world right now, unfortunately, and what they see the most. But my goodness, there are millions of families like mine, like Stephanie's, like yours, to the people listening in, who do have families wanting to help. So just as like a firsthand witness, I'll tell you what Stephanie did, which was probably the hardest thing her husband did. And we're hoping that as you hear yourself in this story, that more of you are willing to do, is to stop doing this alone, to stop, to raise your hand and say, you know what we're doing isn't working. We need some help. And then to accept the help, and then to be willing to do the work, right? Be willing to do the work, even if someone else's actions put you here, because doing that allows families to learn how to more effectively intervene, even just to get this process started, which is obstacle one. But then most importantly is the second one. how do we ensure long-term healing, not just for the person that we're all pointing fingers at, rightfully so, but for the rest of us that have been along the ride? That's how people recover. Otherwise, what they do is periods of abstinence where they're white knuckling it, doing the best they can on willpower. But the whole purpose here, I think, is for those families to just stop, to surrender, and accept help.
Mhm.
I think we all have a common faith basis to realize that doing those are actionable things that allow God to be the force multiplier. It's like we know these things. We've read them, we've studied them in our studies, our personal studies, and in church for our whole life. But do we actually apply them? Are we willing to apply them? And the truth is, it's sometimes the best of families that struggle the most because they try to do this on their own for so long. So Stephanie, to personally witness like some of the things that you were dealing with and how you overcame them, I know you've already seen this and your son's expressed it to you, and your willingness to come share this story is going to help thousands of other families and people in your situation. But most of all, I hope that you just see that shift in yourself. Where once blame and judgment stood in, where anger stood, it's now been replaced with the ability to say, hey, I want to share my story as hard as it is in hopes that it helps other people. I've watched her mentor or minister to people in our program in the most beautiful way. And that to me it's the most beautiful thing. And I know the thing that will most benefit you and your son's relationship moving forward. So thank you for sharing that story. I know it's not easy to
Hey,
do.
I want to say one thing to you too. Your decision with your husband to say to your son that we are not ashamed taught him who Jesus Christ is more than any lesson you ever taught in his home, in your home. That taught him who Jesus is to you. And I believe that will continue to propel him in his healing journey. As your actions completely aligned in a way that spoke so loudly to him. Like my parents, they love God, they love Jesus Christ, and they are not ashamed of their child who is just a mortal having an experience and fell down. And I just, I can't express enough the power of that one thing. It will continue to bless him for the rest of his life. Thank you again for sharing. I I'm just so grateful when people are vulnerable. It blesses so many people. You'll never know the lives you touch with your words, but it takes courage to do it. And I'm just really grateful that you joined us today.
Well, I knew her doing that in the church congregation. Some people wouldn't know what to do, but it was an invitation. And over the next, in the future, people are going to come to her as almost an open door invitation. And I knew that sharing that here would do the same thing. So,
Well, I just want to say, I think, 2 years prior to my son, um, him going to rehab, there were times we just couldn't even look at him, right? You're so frustrated. You're going through so much. And then when we realized he had this problem and it's a fatal illness, and I think that's the other thing people don't necessarily understand the severity of it. Our love for him opened so much. And I know that was God's invitation. And the other thing we always say to him is, we are so proud of him. We end almost every call with, we're so proud of you, because we know just one day of him staying sober is so hard. So I think that message of praise to your loved one is so encouraging. And he always says, thanks, Mom.
That's
So
sweet.
we love it, and we love him, and we're so proud of him.
to all you out there
Amazing.
listening, please, this story can be yours. It's just the willingness to stop doing this alone, to accept help, to bring community professionals and tools into your life. that will change it. And then what you are as a family long-term will be the solution. So thank you for being here today, Stephanie. Really hope this really resonates with some people who are out there maybe where you were a year ago, giving them the courage to step forward.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Okay.